Well, welcome everybody, and thank you for being here to this session on climate change, biodiversity. But mostly, our speakers will run you through what science says and how the media can make a difference. Because we, as media, we have got a very powerful message, and we can also convey powerfully the messages. But the problem is how. And that's why we have invited many scientists, many distinguished scientists. I mean, you all know that we will soon link up with Nobel Prize Giorgio Parisi. And we will try to see how communication can become more effective towards climate change mitigation and to a joint work. And so it is a great pleasure to be here at this pavilion of the Union for Mediterranean. And as that is the first time that it has been put up at a COPE, because it is the first time that the Mediterranean as such has taken importance, and we are trying to, through all the various NGOs, intergovernmental bodies, I mean, trying to find a solution with multilateral and cooperation, which is actually the key to this session. Now, I'm very happy to give the stands to the editor-in-chief, to the director Roberto Natale for RAI for sustainability. Because RAI is a public company, public broadcasters, and it's a pleasure that we have got now a new direction that looks on sustainability, environment, and also on social change, which makes us all more aware, as journalists as well, of what communication and the power that we wield. So I'll give him the word, and then we will move on with the discussion.
Thank you, Maria. Dear colleagues, dear guests, dear all. This new department has been created a few months ago, Maria said, by the Italia Multimedia Service to give even greater strength to our commitment to promote sustainable development issues. We believe that sustainability is the new horizon of the public service media, the strong element of its new legitimacy with citizens. For those of my generation, the role of public service broadcasting was essentially ensuring information pluralism with respect to different political forces. But nowadays, this role is less obvious in a society in which information comes at us from 1,000 sources. It sounds much more contemporary, instead presenting itself to the country as an entity wants to accompany its social and cultural evolution, to commit itself to reduce its gaps, to offer opportunities to reflect on the indispensable protection of the environment and on the meaning that sustainable development has for the concrete life of every individual. Moreover, and this is a very important point, this new RAI mission, we think, this new possible centrality, is the only one capable of being understood by the young people we want to re-engage, that is by the next generation, called by the European Union in its projects. Our full and accurate name is RAI per la sostenibilità, RAI for sustainability, ESG. S stands for social, because recent Italian research says that according to 85% of our population, the word sustainability refers to the environment. Therefore, we have to work hard in order to raise awareness that sustainability means many other things, means respect for civil and social rights, combating economic, territorial, gender, digital, and social inequalities. It means promoting social cohesion, protecting sexual differences, and respecting different cultures. It also means knowing how to connect the environment and the economy, connected the dots, as for example, one of the best in-depth programs on Italia TV, Presa Diretta, does. Riccardo Iacona, the creator of this program, will speak here in a few minutes. There's a need to overcome the confinement of journalists who cover these issues to newsrooms devoted to the environment, as if it were an issue distant from economics and politics. That's why we have promoted a working group on the National Recovery and Resilience Plan, namely the Italian implementation of the Next Generation Plan, which is all about sustainable development goals. RAI, the Italian Public Service, has a fair amount of education TV programs on environmental and scientific issues, particularly broadcasted on its third channel, Rai 3, that perhaps someone knows. And it can also boost a radio campaign that has been insisting on energy-saving issues for 18 years. But still, these are speeches reaching a minority. The 2030 agenda is known to only 42% of the population. So it's not only the information slots that should open up to the climate crisis and sustainable development. If we want to speak to the unconverted ones, that is, those who are not already spontaneously sensitive to these topics, it's essential, we think, that entertainment programs reaching wide audiences with popular language also address such issues. That's why for the past year we have been proposing creating pills on sustainability within Uno Mattina in Famiglia, a weekend pop show on Italy's most popular channel, Rai Uno. From biodiversity to circularity, from insulation to sustainable mobility, from use to regeneration, once a week we try to make a key concept understandable in 2 minutes in simple words, and also try to explain it through good practices implemented by some association or municipalities. And with the same goal, we want to access even entertainment, such as game shows. In short, we must not be afraid to get our hands dirty with popular offerings if we want the climate crisis to become widespread awareness. The media landscape in which the Italian public service moves is characterized by a strong private competitor capturing the audience interest, which shows such as Big Brother, Temptation Island, reality shows that have no qualms even about resulting trash in order to make ratings. Therefore, we must set ourselves the goal of not abandoning important audience segments to empty, lacking civil quality offerings. And we need more and more to look beyond our own backyard. It's an attitude that still does not come naturally to the Italian public service. There are not many information slots helping us understanding the international dimension of all problems. The climate crisis is a clear demonstration of this, as is the migrationism that we too often address by reporting only the very last stage, that is that of arrival on Italian shores, forgetting to tell what the origins are and what those who arrive in Italy have experienced before reaching our country. Maria Cuffaro, our today's coordinator, hosts every week one of the very few slots focusing on telling Italians about world news. For the reason too, we very gladly accepted the invitation of the Union for the Mediterranean. Thank you, Germanos. Thank you. To collaborate as media partner and to organize this panel. It's an essential cooperation for the public service. It reminds us that there's no solution to the tangle of our age within the small walls of our national home. We are also here to reaffirm this commitment and give new strength to this cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you, Roberto. Just a few, before I introduce our keynote speaker and our star, the Giorgio Parisi, I just wanted to give you few information. We will have two question and answer sessions after Riccardo Iacona's intervention. There will be the first question and answer session, and Giorgio Parisi and Amalia and Elvina Finzi, they will be here to answer all your questions. And then towards the end, we will have another question and answer session. And in the beginning, maybe you did not hear because it's very loud here, but you are hearing some strange noises. Those are fragments of extinction. We'll talk about that. You are hearing frogs and insects that had been recorded in the Borneo region. And we will talk also to the composer who recorded all of this in the various rainforests around the world, because these might be sounds that we might be losing forever. But then he will tell us more about it. And now it's a great honor and it's a pleasure to introduce Nobel Prize winner Giorgio Parisi. As you know, theoretical physicist and research in quantum field theory, complex systems, and I am no physicist myself. Oh, you're hearing the frogs, I suppose. These are the frogs and the insects, yes. Only frogs and insects that tell me, nothing else. Yeah. So this is the sounds that we might lose forever. And well, we are already probably not hearing them this well, but thank you very much. We'll be coming back to that. Yeah. So I was introducing Giorgio Parisi. As you know, 2021 he got the Nobel Prize for his research on complex systems. I am no theoretical physicist, so don't expect me to explain what it is about. There, I see him. Thank you very much. Grazie, professore. Grazie.
Thank you so much to everybody. Thank you so much for having invited me to this very interesting and fundamental meeting. It is clear that we have a planetary problem, a planetary emergency, and this is one of the worst emergencies that we have in humanity. It's a very serious crisis, and we have to understand how we should face it, because if we don't take the appropriate measures to control the climate crisis, this is something that will have a very serious impact on our life, and worse all, it will have a serious impact on the life of our children and our grandchildren, and so on and so on. Now, it's clear that science in these relations is extremely important, because all these predictions of climate increase have been done by science. Science has started in the 80s to say that an indiscriminate increase of CO2 would lead to real serious problems with climate change, but this was something that was not followed too much by the most of the people, that did not consider this to be a serious problem for them, and also for the public opinion did not put this as the main problem for when they are going to vote, and also there was also the politician did not stress too much at this point. Of course, there have been some measures that have been taken, but they are very small measures that do not really have a profound effect. We needed to have something much stronger. And of course, one could ask why the prediction of scientists did not have so much effects. And I think that one could understand that there is some problems that have been in this context, and also try to understand how what one should do to remove them. one of the problems is that, especially in the recent years, there have been a strong anti-elitism, something against the elite, and the scientists have been considered to be in some sense part of the elite, and therefore there's a lot of people that say, well, scientists cannot be trusted, scientists are going to change their mind, they are not really sure, and it's clear that this is something that is extremely important because it's clear that if we do not trust the predictions that have been done, this will be difficult to take measures against. Now, this is something that is very difficult because it's clear that if there is some trust missing towards the work of scientists, some trust that in our country, in Italy, may be not so high, but it may be much higher in other countries. And now this is quite difficult. And the scientists, if they say, no, look, you have to trust me, this does not help too much. So one thing that generally should be done, that we should do an effort to have people understand how science formed, how science do work, and also how the thing that is mostly important is how the scientific consensus is formed. Because in this kind of business, it's clear that you can always find one scientist which does not agree on the consensus. Therefore, the consensus is just not voting for one solution or another solution, for one party or another party, but is that most of the people that read the papers, write paper, and so on, agree on the fact that some kind of prediction is correct. So one thing that will be very important in order to have the trust on the work of scientists, to have the situation in which we explain to people how science works. Now, there are many other things in details that have to be explained. One thing is the difference between the first predictions that were done 40 years ago by the two climatologists. I have the great honor to share with them the Nobel Prize, and the predictions that are done nowadays. The prediction of all the prediction for the last 40 years tells that there will be a few degree increase in temperature for the end of the century if we do nothing. However, there is a very strong difference between the quality difference between the prediction on one upon a time and nowadays prediction. And the fact that in nowadays predictions we have controlled, they are controlled in the sense that we know for sure, for example, that in a certain scenario, the increase of temperature will be between 1.5 degrees to 2.5, 2.5. So we really know that this prediction can be trusted. We know the limit of range of which the prediction are sure. And they think that this is possible just because there has been an immense work by an incredible number of scientists to understand all the details of the prediction, to do model all kind, model for the behavior of the ocean, model for the behavior of the absorption of CO2 by the atmosphere, by the plants, and so on. Climatological models. Therefore, all this type of model have been developed, and this was a very important scientific success. And because all these models have been developed and they have been verified by experimental situation, by experimental measurements that they are correct, they are going to provide a framework in which we can do more very precise scientific predictions. And now this is extremely important that to have people understand that scientists do who do not stop on working on this problem. They are still working. For example, there are a lot of ships that are going on in the ocean to understand better how the ocean are going to absorb CO2, which is a very important effect. And I think that this is something that is very important, a strong effort. The scientists are really working hard to decrease the uncertainty of the prediction. Therefore, it's clear that if you go to something between 1.5 and 2.5 degrees, to 1.6 to 2.4, therefore you decrease the uncertainty. If you are doing this kind of work, behind this kind of work, there is an immense work by the scientists. There are many other things that should be stressed on this point. One of the things that very often people object, well, however, for example, 2,000 years ago, maybe the temperature in Europe was higher than now. Maybe the temperature was higher than now 5,000 years ago. But people have to understand that first all we are speaking in this case not a local regional increase in temperature, but we are speaking of global increase in temperature. Now, this global increase in temperature may be quite different in different parts of the world. Fluctuation, local fluctuation, times in which there have been a higher temperature or in Europe, but maybe a lower temperature in Asia and so on, have been quite common. But here, the thing that is important that we are speaking of this kind of increase that is global. And if just because this is a global increase, we need a global response to this kind of challenges. And therefore, this is really important that we do decrease the amount of CO2 that is increasing the atmosphere. And the only things that we can do is to go into the direction of new energy like solar, other kind of energy from the wind and so on. And this will be extremely important because one of the other problems that humanity faces is the fact that the amount of resource that we can extract from our ground is limited. It will not go forever. Therefore, we have to go in the direction in which we use resources that do not affect in a permanent way the situation they have, and they can be used again and again. So this is something that we can go in this direction. And I think that it will be extremely important to go there. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Professor, if you still have 5 minutes, I wanted to have the opportunity to ask you, you explained that science is a work in progress. You explained the complexity of how a scientific process is made. Now, how do you value communication, and how is the communication, the scientific communication? What are your suggestions to the world of the media, for instance? Because it's very important that what you were saying, that awareness is also built by media. You have been always advocating and pressuring, for instance, the Italian government to invest more on research. And similarly, what would you advocate for the media to be able to effectively convey this message? We don't have audio anymore. If you hear me, if you can click the audio button. No?
No. Well, yes. What is important that the people, that media really concentrate us on how science develops. For example, what of the workers on the work of scientists. For example, the fact that there are a lot of ships floating on the oceans to understand the CO2. I mean, the kind of expedition, the kind of work, and the discussions that among the scientists. I think that what it should be extremely important for the media, not only to concentrate on the result of the scientific work, but to concentrate also on the way that the work is done, and also because the impression that one may have of from certain times, not always, of course, from the media, as the scientists live in some kind of ivory tower that are separated from the rest. But nowadays, what we have to understand that scientists which go for example, goes in the South Pacific Ocean to measure the temperature, or to measure the water, the CO2 concentration in the water, do these things not because to enjoy themselves, but it's something that it takes a lot of time for them. It's something they have a heavy responsibility, and they take care of this responsibility they have against the humanity. And therefore, I think that it would be important also to show the human aspect of scientists and not only the result.
Well, thank you. And if you could stay with us, thank you very much, Professor,
Yes, of course,
because I suppose there will
of
be
course.
many questions. And now it's a pleasure to introduce two women, Amalia Ercoli Finzi and Elvira Finzi. Amalia Ercoli Finzi, well, she's been a pioneer. She's been the first space engineer in Italy. And her daughter, Elvina, she's also a PhD in nuclear physics. And well, welcome to you both. It's always a great pleasure to see you together. And they have
Thank you. It's a great pleasure to be with you.
That's great. And you both together, I mean, we are sort of generations of women working together, and that is a great pride, I must say. And it makes me very proud of being a woman as well. You have written a book, and that is, it just comes, I mean, we are talking about how one should communicate science, how more effectively to talk to a broader public. And you wrote this book, which is aimed at the younger generations. I mean, even a 10-year-old or a 13-year-old could read it. It's called Oltre le stelle più lontane. I translate freely, Beyond the Furthermost Stars. And it's, well, it's biographical, autobiographical, short storytelling from Amalia, which brings us back to the Second World War, when her father, he was a partisan, he was fighting against the Nazi occupation, what all he went through, and how that formed her. And Elvina Finzi, she put her experience of the 80s completely different, with a working mother who was a space engineer. And well, to her probably we owe Rosetta. And so, I mean, how was it to grow up with a mother who is a space engineer, which wasn't that common in Italy then, and probably still is not common now, unfortunately. I want to start with Amalia. And I want to ask you, you've been a teacher your whole life. So teaching, communicating has been always your goal. What is the importance of communication, scientific communication? What is it according to you, and how should it be?
Education has been my last role, so I cannot but support it. First of all, education is both a right and a duty. A right declared by our Constitution Act that implies many duties, among which commitment, engagement, and passion. In particular, public granted education is the best place where civil rights are put in practice. Among those, democracy, inclusion, equality, without religious or gender constraint. University, where taught for many years, should be the place where the knowledge is shared and deepened independently from gender, women or men, religion, Christian or Muslim, or origin, European or Asiatic. That should be a target. A country with no education is a country with no future. This goes along with the cost. Education, to its highest levels, including research, has a relevant role in any state budget, both in terms of manpower as in terms of instrumentation, premises, fixtures, high-level professors, tutors, and technologically cutting-edge instrumentation are expensive, but cannot be subsidized by the state. Often, when the crisis occurs, the first budget lines to be cut are the ones related to education. This is a great mistake, as this implies a slowing or recession of the country itself. The shortcut to balance the books has a near-term benefits, but it has dramatic consequences in the long term. All the following generation will not be prepared in an adequate way to face the challenge, resulting less competitive. In the future, there is no space for those who compromise the possibilities of a new generation. I want to make a provocative proposal. The expenses allocated to education and research cannot be defined by the mood of a political administration. This should enter into the Constitutional Act. In order to change its magnitude, the vast majority of the Parliament should agree together with popular referendum in line. This goes along with the construction of an ethical society based on merit, engagement, and willingness to strive for excellence.
Oh, thank you, thank you. So, well, so provocatively, I will now want to ask Elvina, your mother, she has stressed the importance of education that brings with it, let's say, the seeds of democracy, because a scientific thought, I mean, that is what I sort of gather and can summarize, a scientific thought makes an inquiring mind in young people, and an inquiring mind probably will not be comfortable in any regime. It will want democracy. So science brings us to democracy. Now, I want to ask you, what is a scientific thought, if it is, well, taught in schools, but most of all is also supported by the media? What is the change that it can make, and where do you think, what are your suggestions as a scientist?
So I think it's pretty clear that education can bring us from being subject to be citizen. And if we want to be not only citizen, but become aware citizen, this is where the scientific method can play a role. So why is scientific education? So scientific education is taught through its language, that is mathematics. But mathematics means a way of thinking that has logic embedded. And not only, you need a scientific proof of what you do, so an experimental proof. So to check the validity of things. Linking all of this, you have minds that are built in order to question and validate. And they have tools, weapons to do it. We live in a society that is liquid. We live in a society where we receive pieces of information from the web, from the social media, and from any kind of media. So how can you judge what is the truth? And this is the challenge, no? The challenge that we have today is understanding where the truth stands, no? Of all this data we are submerged from and bombarded from. So we need to understand how to distinguish from what is right from what is wrong, what is precise versus what is inaccurate. Sorry. So why? Because otherwise we take decisions that are biased. And then all our decisions that could be also a political decision are not totally free. So having people with a mind that can understand this difference and can question, can really judge independently, no, from all that is surrounded, because checks the validity of what they are submerged from, is the only way that we have in order to have a true democracy. So the only possibility that we have today is to have this seed into our people. So it's not something that comes from an external body or an external entity. It needs to be internal. So we need education, and this needs to be a fundamental right, because we want a better future, and we want citizens. So we want people that are ethical, and we want people that are prepared. But into this education, we need a scientific education, because we want these people to be with critical mind, to be not easily influenced, because they can be in this way the true owner of their future.
Well, thank you very much. And I love the suggestion that the language of science is mathematics. Mathematics is logic. If you apply logic, you can't have bias. So I was just wondering what would happen if many politicians would apply mathematics or probably logic. Some things would change. Now, what strikes me, and I mean, I said it in the beginning, I mean, you're both women, and being a woman, how important was that, is that, and what would you, we are talking scientific thought leads to democracy. And mathematics is usually one of those subjects that is sort of, I mean, girls, they can even not attend or not be very good at maths, who cares? But it does make a real difference when women have equal rights. So tell us, I mean, you're both two women from different generations. What does it mean, and how would you advocate that, I mean, we could be more inclusive towards women in science, and media as well should? Amalia?
In my opinion, women are subject to many prejudices that still hold them back in their self-realization. Things are slowly changing. If I compare it to then, I was a young girl. There is now an improved attention to women's rights. Also, as housework sharing, collaboration on kids' care, work rights, pay equality are today not only theoretically supported by law, but also started to spread in the day-to-day discussion. It is still a long pathway to full equality. Studies says 135 years. But when we will be allowed to reach their own targets, the full humankind will benefit of it. Women have a holistic vision of reality, capable of grasping It's the most important aspect, but always with attention to the social and humanitarian consequences. Choosing not to use their skills is not only short-sighted, but has harmful consequences for everyone, men and women. Today, girls are ready to build a future that is both open and inclusive. They just need opportunities.
Thank you. Thank you. Elvina, want to say some?
Just, to go on with the thinking on the mathematics and the technology. So we know that the subject, like the STEM subject, so science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, are the subject of the future. So to grant a future, we need to have people that are educated in this direction. So we live immersed in a reality of artificial intelligence, of quantum computing, of big data analytics, is our day-to-day life and will be our future. So we need to have young people that are working on it and studying on it. So already the percentage of people in general, men, women, is very little on this subject. And when we go to the ratio of women into that, it's kind of embarrassing. It's embarrassing low. So this is a real problem. Why? Because when we take a decision into this field and there is no full representation, then the decisions are bad because they're not for everybody. They're biased and biased by prejudice. So women need to have a role into this, need to have a role, and they need to grow their self-esteem. And this is not an easy thing, not an easy task in such a culture where we are immersed in. So to help them in growing their self-esteem is one of the biggest pillars that we need to build. But once they have it and somehow they work on it, we need to grant opportunities. And then it's up to them, it's up to us. Space for everybody. Every little girl needs to know that she can do whatever she wants, and then she can make the difference.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And stay with us. Stay with us because soon we'll have also some questions and answers. And thank you for also reminding us that, I mean, the biggest threat to environment is bias, because then wrong decisions are made. And well, the biggest tool is a critical awareness, a critical thought, and a scientific thought that is brought also to the broader public. And here I come to our fourth guest, Riccardo Iacona. He is a friend, a colleague. He is, since many years, he has got a very popular weekly show on Italian TV, and he's one of the very few shows where science is explained, put into context, into social and into scientific context. And I bring you the frustration of many scientists. During COVID, we had talk shows with professors and with opinion leaders who would say the opposite thing put on the same level. So that was confusing. That was what Giorgio Parisi said in his intervention, that can't be. And that is in your show. I know that you have prepared also some videos to show us, because I'd like you to tell us what are the challenges of a journalism that wants to bring to the broader public a scientific thought that can speak to everyone, which is not easy, but you are great at it.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you for your wonderful presentation. Thank you all for the invitation that give me the chance to try to explain in few simple words why, for me, for RAI and our public television, is so important that media follows the climate change and its issue. But first of all, because we lost a lot of time. Look at the date. The first the first IPCC report was written in 1919. The first international meeting in the presence of heads of state took place in Rio de Janeiro in 1992. The first COP took place in Berlin in 1995, and the Kyoto Protocol was approved during COP3 in 1997. And it took years for the contrast to climate change to become a priority in international political agendas. The new Green Deal, the first detailed and fully comprehensive European response to climate change, with the ambitious goal of the reduction of CO2 emissions up to net zero by 2015, was stayed in 2019, 14 years later, Kyoto Protocol. For sure, I'm sure about it, part of this huge delay to action was due to the minimum attention given by mass media to this, the reduction of CO2 and greenhouse gases emissions. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Riccardo. Thank you. Now, we have reached half our session, so if there are any questions for Riccardo, for Amalia and Elvina Finzi, or for Giorgio Parisi, please, this is the time. Yes, please. I don't know, is there, yes, there is a mic.
Hi, I'm Andrea Ghianda, Head of Communication of ECHO, the Italian climate change think tank. Thank you for this great event and for inviting such great speakers today. I think the key of education is crucial, and it's a long-term goal. And scientists are also saying that we don't have time. And what Riccardo was saying before, it was very important that, you know, journalists have the role to translate to fully educated population what scientists have to do. So my question actually goes to the scientists. If journalists ask them the right questions, and if the messages that they want to deliver are actually delivered, or if sometimes the simplification of the TV timing, sometimes when you go on national TV you only have a few seconds, is this enough to explain the issue? We're talking about mitigation, but if I go on TV and I talk to the Italian public and I say we need to do more mitigation, what do they understand? So I think for me it's really to understand how can we convene the messages of the scientists and how the journalists and the media and the communication can translate that. I think I want you just to understand, closing just saying one thing. I had an interview with Antonello Pasini, an Italian climatologist, and I've asked him, don't you feel like that you are like Leonardo DiCaprio in Don't Look Up? And the answer was reassuring, but my question was, do journalists ask the right questions?
Okay, I'll start with Giorgio Parisi. So do we journalists ask the right questions, and the short TV timings that don't do justice what can be done? Give us an evaluation, Professor.
Well, I think that the journalists ask some of the right questions, but there are many questions that could be asked. And it's clear that all things is quite difficult, because when we stay on televisions, when we stay on television, the things are going on very fast. You don't have a very long time to discuss things and so on. So I think that one should try to have this discussion on television, but in somewhat slightly more relaxed time that you have now. Because if you have to give an answer to a very complex problem in a few seconds, this is not good. So I think that one should give more time to scientists to be able to speak.
So more time, sure. And what about, so the questions are the right ones, but I mean, do you have any suggestions on how we journalists can effectively work together with you? You scientists.
I think that the one thing that will be very important, especially when there is a debate at the television, to discuss in advance with the scientists what is going to do, because and also if you invite a few scientists, if they can speak among themselves for half an hour in advance, that will be very extremely important, because otherwise, if they may not understand one with the other one, if there is some discrepancy of opinion, they could adjust the opinion in advance. So I think that everything should be prepared in somewhat in advance, because of course it's more time consuming both for the scientists and from the journalists. But to discuss in advance what people are going to say, in such which question will be asked, and so on. And if the scientists try in advance to answer, this may be that at the end is more effective, because you have to understand that scientists do not have the habit of speaking with a larger public. So scientists sometimes speak in too technical jargon. They are not understood, therefore to have some feedback before they give the official presentation on television, if that what they said is said in a language that can be understood, or in a language that cannot be understood, is something that is very important.
Yeah, you're right. But we should prepare more and take more time. Time is probably essential. Time for preparation. Well, I wanted to ask Amalia and Elvina Finzi if they have any suggestions regarding this question.
And Maria, what we commented before about education goes along for everybody. So if you study and if you have a scientific studies, meaning doesn't need, you don't need to be a scientist to study mathematics and to study science. It's a matter of background. As we learn in school English, and it's part of our fundamental education, mathematics is exactly another language that we need to learn. And this is valid for everybody, whatever you do. If you become a journalist, if you become a psychologist, if you become a nuclear physicist or any other scientist. So it's really a matter of education, and it's really a matter of preparation. Then, once said that, when you have a time that is very little amount of time, giving an easy message that is true, and it's spoken with an easy language, doesn't mean that you have to be simplistic. So these are two different things. You can be, you can try to be as having the best language with the people that you talk to, but without losing the quality of the message you deliver. I think it's something that also scientists needs to learn how to do.
Yes, yeah, of course you have to translate it and make yourself comprehensible. Are there any further questions? Yes, please.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, and thanks to everyone. Thanks for having organized this very distinguished and very interesting meeting. It's a privilege to me to be there and also to speak with some of the participants. I have just a very quick follow-up to the words that our Nobel Prize Professor Parisi said. Well, by my name, by the way, I'm Alberto Pirni, and I work in moral philosophy at the Scuola Superiore Sant'Anna. Well, I would say we are used, as philosophers, we are used to have unfinished disputes, unfinished dialogue, but we are expecting something. I don't want to say something more, but something different from science. Meaning, we are expecting kind of final and definitive words by science. Now, Professor Parisi, in his told well, there are few scientists that are speaking other languages or are, let's say, raising other opinions. Well, actually, we have to say that there are more than a little number. So I'm just wondering, we don't have to, if I may express in those words, we don't have to speak to the already believers. don't have to speak to who is already convinced that climate change is an issue or a tremendous challenge for this generation and the previous and the future ones. We have to define with definitive words who is not convinced about that. We are, let's say, as a social scientist, as philosopher, sociologists, political scientists, lawyers, we are on the same page. But we are expecting from the other side, and in that sense, I'm really happy to have this opportunity. Also, it's an honor to speak with the first Italian space scientist and the other colleagues, where we are expecting a new kind of allegiance, and perhaps time are more than mature for doing that. Thanks in advance.
Well, Professor Parisi, I mean, I want just to follow up on the philosopher's question. I mean, usually audiences, broader audiences, in Italy it happens, we expect scientists to give us a final word and the truth, and that has to be it. But I happen to have a son who is a philosopher as well. And so he explained... No, but absolutely not, absolutely not. So he explained to me, well, I mean, scientific thought and philosophical thought, of course, it is a work in progress. It means that things have always will be put into question. It means to keep your mind open. Is that so? I wanted to ask you, how does one convey that? Because that has been, I saw, a critical aspect as well during COVID. Everybody was expecting the final word, and the final word probably will never come. Is that so?
I think that this is a very important point. Therefore, one should make quite clear that the prediction that science are doing are always attached to a certain amount of incertitude. But however, this incertitude is something that is in certain cases high, in certain cases low. And therefore, this is something that is very important. It's very important that the prediction science looks in a certain case, something like exit poll. And now in exit poll, we have accustomed to see some fork, some upper bound and lower bound on the result, but also when scientists do present these forks, this effect, this upper bound and lower bound, the limits in which this happens, these are normally taken out from by the press. So the thing that is very important is that to have to communicate that scientists are very conscious of the limit of their predictions, and most of the work that they're doing is to find it correctly which are the limit of the predictions that they are doing. And one should do all possible effort to communicate also this part of science, which unfortunately quite often is forgotten.
Elvina, you want to add something to this philosophical/social question?
Well, no, that is quite clear. I mean, it's something that was said in the beginning. The first problem is that we have some part of the population that does not trust science. It's clearly that if people do not trust science, they will not trust everything that we are doing. And that is something that is very difficult to change. I think that education will be extremely important in this direction. But this is a serious problem because many people trust science and therefore is convinced about what we say, about the arguments that we are doing and so on. And we have to deal clearly with people that are not convinced by science or are not convinced by the argument. And this is much more difficult because also quite often the channel of communications are very difficult with them. For example, the social, they have sometimes close bubbles and so on, for which it's very difficult to communicate with them. But it's quite clear that social scientists and philosophers are well welcome on board on this extremely difficult problem.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. I don't know if are there any further questions. Well, if not, we will move to the second part of our panel. And the first speaker is Professor Natalie Hilmi. She's a, oh, well, yes, these are our frogs and our insects, and we have to really keep them dearly in our heart. And, well, I wanted to introduce Natalie Hilmi. She's a macroeconomist. She's specialized in international finance, environmental economist. She works with the Fund of Monaco. And, well, being has specialization in finance, I wanted to ask you, this COP27, finance is key because people, society is demanding to be that for loss and damage they get paid. So that's a financial issue. And you have once said that blue finance can be the key to solve and to mitigate climate change. How and how can it happen now? I mean, how can this bring towards a moving forward? I mean, how can finance help?
Okay. In fact, if we want to understand what climate finance is, we have to understand climate change and the consequences of climate change, and especially to understand that those consequences are more important developing countries. For the people that produce less CO2 emissions, but who are more vulnerable to climate change. I can take an example on the Mediterranean, because we are on the Mediterranean pavilion. For example, due to climate change and global warming, the commercial species will migrate from the south, meaning North Africa, so the south of the Mediterranean, to the north. They will go northward, and the consequence will be a loss of revenue for the people who are in the south, but also it will impact their food security, as the fish are part of their protein intake. So those countries, what they want to say, that they need more money to adapt. Most of the money for the moment is going to mitigation and not enough to adaptation. And we consider that Africa participated 3.5% only to the problem of CO2 emissions, and they receive only 1.5% of the finance that goes to the adaptation and mitigation. So there is a problem, and this is why they speak about loss and damage, because they are losing a lot with the climate change, and they also speak about climate justice. They want this justice to be done and to receive something to compensate what they are doing.
Sure. You had also prepared some slides, right? Sorry. You had also prepared some slides, or?
I don't need for the moment. If you have other questions, I can use them. Thank you.
Well, thank you, because I mean, this is the point of this COP27. I mean, how to compensate loss and damage that especially Africa, Asia, I mean, are suffering at the moment. Now I want to focus back on the Mediterranean and introduce another colleague, Thierry Pardi. He's the editor-in-chief of a magazine that is called Mediterraneo, that we cooperate together with RAI. Thierry Pardi, he works for public TV, French public TV. He's based in Marseille. Oh, there you are. Benvenuto. And Well, this is, I mean, cooperation is part of the solution. And we are public, we will both work for public TV, and we produce a show together since many, many years, but now you will tell us more about it. And so this is also showing how communication, cooperation really creates bridges culturally, but also it goes beyond that. So Thierry, I mean, the show is called Mediterranean, so what is more apt for the Mediterranean pavilion? And you have been telling stories on the Mediterranean since many, many years. Please, Thierry.
Yes, good afternoon. I speak from Marseille, from the space of office of French television, France 3. Climate issues are at the center of our work in co-production with our friends at RAI, in particular RAI Sicily of Palermo, for the production of the magazine Mediterraneo, television magazine. We are interested more in showing the realities, what people experience on a daily basis, and above all the initiatives to fight against the effects of climate change. The reports that we produce in the Mediterranean and especially in the southern countries must show concretely how they can adapt with new techniques. For example, for the reuse of wastewater. The objective of the programs we present is also to educate by showing that all the difficulties to come due to global warming can be overcome by using existing resources. The Mediterranean countries must be at the forefront in this field. What also interests you in this co-production is to make people who watch the program aware that the Mediterranean countries are not standing still in the face of the consequence of climate change. Our role is to denounce what is not working, but also, and above all, the show on television or which person in their daily life can reduce the risks. It's true that the recent climatic events in the Mediterranean must make youth think even more, and one television, we must make the general public aware of the consequence of climate change. We will continue to work in this direction with our friends at RAI Television. We are important responsibility from in particular for the young people to have a responsibility and a role from the pedagogic interesting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Thierry. Thank you. Also, it's very nice that, I mean, France and Italy have got this long history of cooperation, well, in TV, and that is, at least, that is very good, because, I mean, cooperation bridges much more than, well, politics or whatever. Now, from Marseille, I want to bring you to the southernmost Mediterranean with Fatiha Shara, and she works for public Algerian radio, and she told me before we were speaking, I mean, of course, it's, as Nathalie Hilmi said, it's mostly the people who live on the southern shore that feel the brunt of climate change, and Algeria is especially, many problems have arisen in the past years, social, environmental, and not only. But Fatiha, please.
Thank you very much. Thanks for everyone. Merci beaucoup pour votre présence. First, excuse me by my pronunciation, because I work in French and Arabic. So, at the current global context, let me first tell you what I think about climate change I imagine it as a sieve and tamis for the national politic. So only sustainable and planified projects or actions we need, not projects, sorry, and activities not linked at the government, because especially in developing countries, as in Africa continent, when government changes, all projects and programs change. It's really a big challenge for us. So we must review first our priorities, especially at the actual context of energy problems and crisis at the global. As the national, in Algeria especially, as the national use of water, especially at this drought period. Example, last year in November, there was rain, but this year an insignificant amount, which worries farmers in particular. Second point, also among the challenges, the rate of desertification. But the current efforts of the Algerian state bring hope. Now the Algerian state is reviewing the management of the green dam as tool to combat desertification. Le barrage vert comme un moyen de lutte contre la désertification. The third point, the export of the dates is among, ça veut dire l'export des dates is among Algeria's main incomes after petrol and gas. So it's very important to protect the date palm against climate change. Almost 20 years ago, because I work at the Algerian radio since 1999. People thought that climate change concerned only scientific researchers and decision makers. But now they are beginning to sense the danger, really. But unfortunately, or paradoxally, most of them don't believe that the solutions are collective. They attend or they waiting for a solution made by government. This is the point on which the media must or have work hard and long. First, work in the field. Ça veut dire travailler sur le terrain. Ce n'est plus le moment de vraiment de parler de loin. On a vu que les gens ont confiance. People believe journalists who makes investigation, who works in proximity of them. Second point, it's essential that the journalist be credible, because I speak generally about developing countries. Sometimes working with scientific researchers or decision makers or different partners, les différents partenaires ou bien les parties prenantes, le journaliste tombe dans le piège de devenir ami ou bien avoir une certaine complicité. It's not good for the credibility of journalists. He must be impartial by keeping distance, a certain distance between him and the others. It's very important. And the last point, if I can explain it in French, or excuse me, I can't have words easily. Tout à l'heure, we speak about communication, le bon journaliste ou bien la bonne communication. I think about scientific subjects as climate change, journalist must be specialized. He must has a good scientific background. We don't have, on n'a pas droit à l'erreur. Ça c'est un. He must understand scientific concepts. Also, he must work on field or in field, sur le terrain. Parce que, et aussi, il faut faire la part des choses. Est-ce que le journaliste fait la vulgarisation scientifique en ce qui concerne le changement climatique, ou bien il couvre les sujets liés au changement climatique en prenant en considération que c'est un sujet à fond scientifique, mais qui a des retombées politiques, socio-économiques, etc. Donc, parce que maintenant, les journalistes, tout le monde dit oui, je vais couvrir je suis spécialiste dans le changement climatique. Mais non, il faut faire la part des choses. Est-ce que vous êtes en train de faire la vulgarisation? Et ça, c'est même le scientifique peut le faire. Ou bien vous êtes en train de faire des investigations sur terrain et aussi aborder les sujets d'une manière courageuse et pertinente. Et vraiment, surtout, il faut toujours garder, keep a distance between the journalists and different parties. I don't remember the name of sir. Le monsieur qui a posé tout à l'heure la question, il a dit voilà. Yeah. Okay, I will finish. Il a parlé de. Il faut aussi parfois oser et laisser la parole à ceux qui ne croient au changement climatique. Maintenant, tout le monde croit et c'est all people maintenant on sent tous l'impact of climate change. But maintenant, la différence entre ceux qui disent que les changements climatiques, c'est un cycle que la Terre a connu depuis toujours, et ceux qui disent que l'apport humain est très important. Parfois, il faut avoir le courage et inviter to have different opinions. We must avoir peur. I don't know how to explain. Yeah. Because we have arguments, scientific arguments, okay, we invite different opinions. Please, if someone has question, I hope that will in French or Arabic, because I have a lot of things to tell or to explain. And excuse me.
Thank you very much. Thank you, because especially you stress the credibility of journalists and the courage that one does need. One has to go in the field. Very, very important, Fatiha. Now it's the time that I would like to give the microphone to the one who recorded Frogs and Insects. He's a composer, and he has got a project that has been also funded by the European Union. And what you've heard were fragments of extinction. So now he will tell you more about this project, because he traveled around and he recorded in a really incredible way the sounds of an ecosystem, a complex ecosystem. We have just heard a little sound, and probably not with a great attention because of all the noise that we humans create. But David Monacchi, please.
So thank you for this invitation, and good evening to everybody. We were trying to do some, to open some sensorial windows. Today is the day of biodiversity within this conference, so the idea was to, but I mean the noise here really doesn't allow us to be concentrated, to understand something of those soundscapes. Well, we are here, I'm here because I kind of, I'm bringing this idea that together with the extinction crisis, which is deep right now, we know the numbers are really bad. We're talking about 30,000 species per year that goes extinct, and the background extinction is one species every 4 years. So we are talking about a silent catastrophe. Life on Earth is disappearing. Okay, 4 species are extinct, are going extinct within this panel. Okay, 4 species. So in 1998, we started this project, Fragments of Extinction, with the idea of going in the tropical forests, in the places which are highest in biodiversity, which are old, very old, and which can still contain some imprint of this intangible heritage of nature. At the UNESCO level, we envision to protect and to the intangible, the tangible and intangible values of the culture, of our culture. But once we go to nature, we have only the tangible. We don't have the intangible. So nature is actually delivering, still delivering. It's a deposit of intelligence. You know, within those primary forests at the equator, we have really, we are able to listen still today, to listen some paleo choirs, some ancient eco-symphonies that can inform us on which was the strategies that evolution used in order to have thousands of species collaborating in a different way within the same environment. And this is clear on soundscape. So what we have done is to go in the tropics as soon as possible, in as many places as possible, to record these fragments of the sonic world which is changing in front of our very eyes. So these are parts of a film, so it's we can see some moments of the recording sessions that we've done in the Amazon, in Africa, in Southeast Asia. We work at the equator, 5 degrees north and south, because there the biodiversity is highest, and we can find large patches of primary forest which is still completely undisturbed. And is completely, let's say, the ecosystem integrity there can be very high. So we prioritized these places, and we have now collected 20 years of data in a 3-dimensional way. So we use 38 microphones at the same time in order to collect the entire spherical sounds of these forests, which is changing now, right now. We expect that in 30 years, things will be changed because of course, deforestation, because of a silent changer, which is invasive species. Okay, imagine that these ecosystems have been developing over the last 45 million years in an undisturbed way, more or less, at least in Southeast Asia. So 45 million years of time for nature to develop this eco-symphonies that we've not even decoded yet. We've not even recorded, and we don't know what's inside there. I'm working with entomologists, zoologists in the tropics, and at a species level, we arrive only for birds and mammals. At an amphibians and insect level, at an insect level, we arrive to 10% of recognition. So we don't even know what we're losing. Okay, so my initial idea, and now within my collaborators, within my people, was to store that for future generation, but also use these soundscapes for present generation in order to shorten the communication. We're talking about the role of media now, which is very important, and also immersive art, sensorial, science-based art can be very important. You're looking at the Sonosphere, which we installed in Pesaro. This is the first acoustic planetarium, and we opened the Sonosphere with David Sassoli, which came to open it, and it's a sensorial and cognitive theater to have people living for 45 minutes in complete darkness and then have people being exposed to the data that we know on the biodiversity crisis. This is a spatial spectrogram. This is a spectrogram, so understanding what's going on. And even if we have 20 years of data from the major tropical primary rainforests, we ended up doing in the Sonosfera a show, an experience on climate change, showing the data of IPCC, of IPBES, of IUCN, because that's now important. We really need to push the paradigm shift from the ecocentric, from the anthropocentric perspective of the world to an ecocentric one. And we need to use all media we have in order to really to shorten this awareness, the leap of awareness. And we need to really to support the individual leap of consciousness, even through heart and sound. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, because I mean, seeing all this complexity that we might have lost or might be losing is really frightening. And well, thank you, because I mean, this makes us more aware. This raises awareness in a very, very effective way. Now, I have got another session of question and answers, if there are any. Otherwise, we will head straight for the conclusions. But are there any questions for our speakers? If not, it is my pleasure. I mean, here we are all guests, and we are guests of the Union of the Mediterranean, and we have got here the director, Gramenos Mastroianni. And well, so I would like to give him the floor.
Slides, please. Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I come here with two responsibilities. The first one is to express how pleased and honored we are to host here at the Mediterranean Pavilion, which is not only Union for the Mediterranean, it is the common effort, the joint effort of 12 organizations of stakeholders in the Mediterranean to host such an incredible panel. And the second responsibility is an acute awareness of the fact that I am the last obstacle between you and the cocktail. So, I'll try to make it brief. We have talked about communication, but communication is not only for journalists. It is also a responsibility for people like me who are negotiating at the COP, who are going around. And for us, it is a challenge. The common perception is that climate change is a big problem, so it does not concern me. I've got nothing to do with it. It is up to the big guys to solve it, the United Nations, the presidents, the ministers. Okay, but this is a misperception. What can we do here at the COP? A better agreement. What can states do? They can create laws or fiscal measures. Fine. But let us take one step back, and we will realize that these are pieces of paper, and the ecosystem does not react to pieces of paper. They become significant, as it has been underlined by our friend Diacona, when they are a way to make the only actors of change, the only possible actors of change, make something. And these actors is me and you, individuals. The only solution to the crisis arrives when there is a sufficient sum of change in the behaviors of each one of us. You would object, okay, but states, for instance, have the possibility to forbid bad behaviors and to encourage good behaviors. Yes, but this is true up to a certain extent. No, that guy there, his name is Diocletian. He was emperor, and in the year 301 after Christ, he had to cope with the first well-documented case of hyperinflation. Prices in Rome were going mad. So he decided to solve it the way an emperor would do, the way a state would do. He adopted a law that simply said prices will not grow anymore.
And what he obtained is that on the official market, effectively, prices did not rise anymore, but all the commerce shifted to the black market, where prices were soaring, were increasing even worse because he had forbidden. This is to say, even if we adopted here the best possible agreement in the history of mankind, and people around us don't understand it, don't back it, do not agree with it, we just have a piece of paper. So we need to bring on board real people, and we have to do it very fast. And we made some mistakes in this. The first mistake is that we appealed to the ideal human being that we should be. One who is committed, one who is prepared to put all his efforts to save the future. Actually, we should create a new generation of people like this, because at the moment there are not many like this. We should go through education for a new generation, but there is a problem. We don't have time. We have 5 years. If we don't do the right thing within 5 years, we will trespass some thresholds that will make our world incompatible with a organized mankind. So we need to bring on board not this ideal man, not this ideal human being, but the real human being, which is different. And it requires a different kind of communication. We tried leveraging the most ancient and effective pre-conscious mechanism of engagement. You recognize probably this photo. It was the first one used to raise awareness about climate change. When you see this photo, you are instinctively and pre-consciously pushed from inside to do something about this poor polar bear. And it is a sensation that we probably have also in front of this photo. This is instinctive. We call it compassion, solidarity, but actually it's just an aspect of a more general capacity that we have, which is called empathy, feeling things from inside, from the perspective of someone else. Empathy is instinctive and is rooted in a neuronal circuitry which is very old. It's called the mirror neurons. It was very useful in building organized societies, societies in which we do not only compete one against each other, but now it has become dysfunctional. Why? Because at the moment in which the mirror neurons were given to us by evolution, the situation was very different for us. Our horizon was local. So evolution chose a trick to trigger empathy, and it linked it to visualization. We only feel instinctively inclined to intervene beyond our own interests when we visualize a situation of sorrow. And it worked when our horizon was a village. I saw you suffering yesterday, I see you suffering today, I will see you suffering tomorrow, so it's a continuous. But in our world, in our current world, the suffering is the suffering of a polar bear. And we don't see the polar bear every day. With a problem, as soon as we cease visualizing suffering, we go back into indifference. And what we are fighting today is not climate negationist. It's indifference, sluggishness in our mobilization. What I'm telling to you is so true that you might recall that all campaigns, TV campaigns for fundraising are structured in the same way. Roughly 30 seconds of images of crude suffering, and they all end with the same words. Normally I ask my students, can you remember the last word of these TV spots? And usually they reply, call or donate. And they forget that the last word is another one, it's now. Call now, donate now. Because marketing professionals know that after 5 seconds you stopped seeing those things, you go back into your indifference. So maybe this was not the right path. And there is another problem we have with the real human being. It is proven, and it is a transcultural situation, that only a very small percentage of mankind includes in its choices the common good. It's less than 1%. When we vote, for instance, we don't vote for the best candidate for our country. We vote for the candidate that defends my interest, even against the interest of my country. And when we go shopping, we don't choose that one t-shirt that doesn't have child labor inside. We choose the best quality price. Still, there is a small portion of population that has an instinctive inclination to care for the common good, but they're not on the market. They are in the fair trade shops. which are a fantastic symbol, but they're not the market. And at this stage, we need to bring on board the market. What can we do? Some hints came out from a story that you know, which is the story of palm oil. You know, at a certain point, people realized that mass production of palm oil was a problem for the common good, for the ecosystem, for indigenous people, for fauna. And so this small group of people reacted, trying to alert the others. And they decided to use the empathy channel, the one of the polar bear. The photo I'm showing you is taken from a short video, which fantastic video. It was produced by Greenpeace, and it shows an orangutan trying to stop a caterpillar from destroying his tree. Who is not moved in front of such a scene? We are all moved, but it only lasts as long as we watch the film. And after that, we forget about the forest, we forget about the indigenous people. But then something changed because the message changed, cynically changed. We shifted from telling this is bad for the forest to telling this is bad for you, which is, by the way, half a lie. Palm oil is not bad for health. Processed, industrially processed palm oil is bad for health. But this would happen even with the best extra virgin olive oil if you process it that way. But this is another story. Anyway, when the message changed from the common good to you, things started to move. You started seeing announcements on the packaging. This has no palm oil, this is sustainable palm oil, and all the rest. So have we found a solution? Do we have, through communication, to threaten one by one, this is a problem for you? Unfortunately, this also does not work. Because a threat is a little bit like a diet. You get used to it and then you overcome it. You know that that fried chicken with chips is bad for your health. You resist, and then comes a day in which you say, okay, I will have my fried chicken with health. But there is another aspect of things which is very promising. That is, you cannot threaten people about the consequences. They will not be mobilized. They will fall back into indifference. But you can tell them another message, which is a message to you and not for the world. That is, sustainable is better for you. And it's working very fast. You know the tourist sector, 10 years ago, the popular destination was the all-inclusive resort, which is an eco-monster for the population around them, for the forest and all the same. Today, they are prepared to pay huge sums for the exact opposite, to sleep in a very uncomfortable place with mosquitoes around, to have the privilege to be in touch with pristine nature. There is a field of commerce which is growing very fast, which is organic food. It is not exactly transparent, but let's take it as a good sign. Organic food segment is growing very fast. But is it because it protects nature or because it empowers local rural communities? Let us be sincere. No, it's growing because you think it is better for your health and it tastes better. So we need communication. We need to get on board everyone, and we need to do it effectively, even cynically. It is important to educate people, to explain, but now we don't have time. We need a good reason to have them on board, and maybe we can leverage this idea. What's good for you is good for your planet. What's good for your planet is good for you. But we cannot do it, you know? So, on behalf of all these people that you see running around in the COP, that still are struggling to get the best agreement, the best law, the best fiscal measure, even though they know they are just pieces of paper if people are not around. And excuse me if I dare, on behalf of our Mother Earth, let me send an appeal to media, a vibrant appeal, and I will quote an old film. Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're my only hope. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. That was really very effective. And well, we came to the closing of this very interesting session, and I wanted to thank and greet Giorgio Parisi and la professoressa Amalia Finzi e Elvina Finzi. Grazie di essere state con noi. And Thierry Pardi, I see him still connected. Thank you very, very much, and it's been really an honor to be with you and having to and hosting you. Thank you very much.
No, cigarette, 2 minutes.